Welcome to Money Making Conversation. I am your host, Rashawn McDonald. I tell everybody it's time to stop reading other people's success stories and start writing your own. Always lead with your gifts and don't let your age, your friends, family, or coworkers stop you from planning or living your dreams. My interviews that I bring on Money Making Conversation will provide you, being a consumer or a business owner, access to celebrities, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and what I like to call industry decision makers. My next guest is Yusef Salaam. He's an inspirational speaker and prison abolitionist who at age 15 was one of the 5 teenage boys wrongfully convicted and sentenced to prison in the Central Park jogger case. In 1997, he left prison as an adult to a world he didn't fully recognize or understand. In 2002, the sentence for the Central Park 5 was overturned and all 5 were exonerated for the crime they did not commit. He is on the show to talk about his new book, Better Not Bitter, Living on Purpose in the Pursuit of Racial Justice. It is the first time that one of the new exonerated, or the now exonerated 5, is telling their individual story in his own words. Yusef writes his narrative growing up Black in Central Harlem and in the 80s, being raised by a strong, fierce mother and grandmother, his years of incarceration, his re-entry into the world, and of course, exoneration. Please welcome to Money Making Conversation. I'm going to call him correctly like his grandmother called him, Master Yusef Salaam. How you doing, sir?
Listen, it's a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for having me. This is a great moment, great opportunity to really talk truth to power and utilize story for what it's really for, right? To shine light in the darkness in the world.
Absolutely. We were talking off air, but let's bring everything on air. Like I moved to New York. I was living in New York between 1988 and 1990. I went up there to pursue my comedy career. Felt I was going to be the next Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor. He was the legend. I knew I couldn't be the next Richard Pryor, but Eddie Murphy, I thought I could get to him. And I lived that life, and if you was in downtown Manhattan, you could not catch a cab. They would not stop and give you a cab if you were trying to go to Harlem. It was just ridiculous how Blacks were being treated at that time and being second-class citizens. And so I was there living in the city. I was living at 86th and First, which is Yorktown right there. So I was living in a little, you can call it a one-bedroom. You said, but it wasn't no one bedroom. It was a room. It was a room, brother. It was a room, but it cost like $800 a month.
Not in New York, it wasn't a one bedroom. I shouldn't say that. Not in the rest of the country, right? There are examples of what one bedrooms are really one bedroom. But right. I know exactly what you mean when you say the room, because New York City, I'm living in Atlanta now, and if you look at my house in New York will be over $1 million. I didn't pay over $500,000 for my house down in Atlanta, and it's a mansion.
Absolutely. Well, I live in Atlanta, so we have to connect. So I didn't know you was down in Atlanta. I definitely got to connect, bring you by my office and sit down, because I read the book, man, Better Not Bitter. And based on what happened to you at such a young age, one would think this would be a book about anger, about hate, a book about how I've been done wrong. It's a book about motivation, a book about slice of life, telling your story, the people who were important in your life, people who were important in your life when you was incarcerated. But also it's a celebration of overcoming the odds. Talk to us.
Absolutely. What I really want to expose in Better Not Bitter, my memoir, is I want folks to know that when you fall in life, and it's not a matter of if you fall, because my good friend Les Brown always reminded me, it's about when you fall. Try to land on your back. And landing on your back is about trying to find the good, trying to find the blessings in everything, right? Looking at the experience and not necessarily saying to yourself, oh my goodness, this is terrible, but looking at the experience and understanding that God is making sure that you become a survivor, right? Mm-hmm. And so I looked at my story and I heard the words of Dr. Maya Angelou. And Maya Angelou, Dr. Maya Angelou said something so powerful. She said, you should be angry, but you must not be bitter. She said, bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. Then she teaches us the alchemy. She says, use that anger. You dance it. You march it. You vote it. You do everything about it, she said. And then she said, you talk it. Never stop talking. I found that Black men rarely get the opportunity to really talk about the experiences that are plaguing us, especially in America. Mm-hmm. But when we do get that opportunity, it becomes so transformative. It's therapeutic. It's a beautiful thing. And you can talk about these experiences, get them off your chest. And then when you can look at it from a different angle, you get the opportunity to see the hand of God in the midst
Well, the important part of this conversation that we are having is your faith, because it drove you to a point, to a sense of security, a safe zone, and being thrown into an environment that you knew you were innocent. You knew it would change even when you got out, it would change the way your perception of opportunity in life. At what point did it start to come together that, hey, man, this is my life? And you started building this support system in the prison, because you had a support system outside, your sister, your mom, your grandmother. That was strong. But inside, you also had to build a support system. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about being insulated in the fire, right? And I call it that. I say it that way because, I feel like the system created this condition.
Right.
And in the condition they created, they said, we're going to put him in the fire. This situation that we're going to put the 5 of them in is going to be so terrible, so difficult. They will never be able to escape. And if they happen to miraculously survive, they will never be able to be successful in life. And the beautiful thing, like I said, is that being in that fire, I remember reading a poem, and the poem said, prison life in many ways can be likened to the womb. If the life inside becomes stillborn, the womb becomes the tomb. And so this idea that you do not want to die physically, mentally, or spiritually in the womb of America. Right? Many people go in and they physically die in that womb. They come out alive, but they are void of any life. And I think that when I looked at my situation, I said, man, well, what can I do? How can I talk to people to let them know that I'm innocent? And what I found out is that me telling people that I'm innocent, the officers said to themselves, this guy is not supposed to be here. I mean, the officers, the inmates, of course, as well. But that power of being able to have them see me for the first time, as opposed to seeing what the system wanted to define me as. They said, no, this guy is not who the system is saying he is.
Right.
This guy is different, and it really allowed us to become modern day Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and I think that that's one of the powers of story that I'm telling in this particular book, and utilizing what I understand about what happened to me.
Well, one thing you didn't lose going to prison was your sense of style. Your sense of, the shoes, the tie, the suit, what I'm saying? You say, look at you even smiling now, because what I'm talking about, coming on my show, no tie on. Every picture I see this brother in, he wearing shoes I wear. I was so mad. I was looking at this book. I said, ooh, look at them 2 tones right there. Every picture he take with the exonerated 5, he the only one got a suit on. He's the class. He's the epitome of excellence. He articulates. He got his degree while he was in college. Took advantage of the system. So let's talk about this style that resonates your personality. Why is that important?
Yeah, so I think it's important because it has nothing to do with what other people see,
mm-hmm.
right? It has everything to do with what you see when you look at yourself in the mirror. Right? People say all the time, wow, you clean up nice. And I'm not talking about me, but I'm talking about any one of us who chooses to refine ourselves, right? We put a suit on, we put a tie on, we clean our hair up, we clean our face up. Whatever it is that we do, we look at ourselves. First of all, other people look at us and say, wow, you clean up nice. But what happens is the most powerful thing when you look in the mirror at your own self. I often think about my circumstances and say to myself, thank God I don't look like what I've been.
Right.
Most people look at me and they say, no, this guy he could have never gone to prison. He doesn't sound like a person who went to prison. He doesn't look like or act like. Nothing about him says prison.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's the beauty of God. God has allowed me to be a shining example of what could be possible for all of us, right? We can reject, literally throw back the definition of life that they want to give us and know that we were born on purpose and with a purpose, as opposed to being relegated to the modern day cotton fields of America, right? That's what they want for us to believe. So many of the stories that I've heard have been stories where people have said, no, we are supposed to be dead or in jail before we reach the age of 21. And many of us play into that false narrative. And I'm going to say false narrative again, because it absolutely is. When you think about the grand miraculous thing that happens to all of us, our mothers and fathers get together. We become one of over 400 million options racing to the edge, and we are chosen to meet. Look at the odds. That means that we are born on purpose, and if we're born on purpose, we have a purpose. And so the psychosocial reality of being able to really understand that the system may tell you you're not worth nothing.
Right.
And if you believe it, you're going to move throughout your life like you're a mistake. But once you believe that you're worth everything, once you believe that you are the future mover and shaker of tomorrow, you will begin to move throughout your life with a different type of purpose. And that's what this book is all about. It's about me understanding what happened to me understanding that I had to remember what my mother told me, the very last instruction she gave me. She said, they need you to participate in whatever it is that they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. Not participate, refuse. And so how does that show up? It shows up by you refusing to accept the box that they want to put you. Right. You refusing to be that gnat. I forget the name of the study that they've done, but there's a study where they put a gnat in a container, and the gnat only jumps so high, but the gnat can jump 10 times higher than that. Mm-hmm. That believes only that it can jump that high. Mm-hmm. And the gnat teaches the children of the gnat that can only jump that high. Imagine if we teach people that we can, we see this in sports, right? We see Michael Jordan, a Kobe Bryant, a LeBron James, any of the great Shaq, right? We see them doing sacred geometry on the court. It looks magnificent, but when we understand what we're looking at, we know that that is us as a people. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Wow.
You know, when I'm talking to Yusef Salaam, Master Yusef Salaam, your grandmother would always say that to you. And it says in your chapter, you talk about a name is important. My name is Rushion McDonald. I thoroughly believe that if my name was Ricky McDonald, I would be a different person. My name's Rushion. I've always been treated different. I've always been noted. You know, people can't spell it, so I have to correct them, or if they learn how to spell it, then they respect me or understand my brand. Talk about why your grandmother, who passed away, I think 2014, correct? And why was Master important to her in front of your name?
I think what she was doing, which was so important and really so impactful, was that she needed, for one thing she needed to do was to make sure that the people who were holding me captive needed to know who they had. Mm-hmm. I always got my mail, and I'm saying that because for those who don't know, when you write to a person in prison, that letter is fondled, is read by the prison officials before it gets to the person that it's supposed to get to.
Right.
I always got my mail. So imagine the officer getting the mail and saying, this is to Master Yusef Salaam. Reads it, sends it off. The content of the letter is what is important. Over and above the title it's addressed to. Because the title is telling me to straighten my back. The title is telling me to remember, not just remember who I am, but remember in a Sankofa kind of moment, sacred memory. Who you are is attached to the people you come from, even though Dr. James Baldwin said to be African American is to be African without memory and American without privilege. And so we experience this, right? Many of us know we're not supposed to be under these kinds of conditions. But imagine when you are told that by one of your elders who knows the truth.
Right.
He's sending you messages. She's sending you seeds. She's allowing those seeds to blossom and bloom in this dark space called the womb of America, so that you can metamorphosize into the butterfly that you need to be. And it's so important because if somebody calls you out of your name, usually you get upset until you begin to accept it.
Right.
And so you have a Kunta Kinte, knowing that he's a prince, knowing who he is and whose he is and where he comes from, being told, no, your name is now told. He fights tooth and nail until miraculously we see something and we don't see it until later. He buries the truth inside of self, even though he accepts outwardly what they are saying. But inwardly, he never accepts that his name is told. He knows who he is. He knows he's a prince. He knows that his people are looking for him. He was kidnapped, just like people get kidnapped in America now, today.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the great transatlantic slave trade. Many of us have unfortunately had that reality heaped upon us. And so we don't know where we came from. We don't know who we are. We actually begin to hate ourselves and everything we have been told about us, because what? As we look out of the window of life, we see others looking in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Everything advertised with white skin. Everything is talked about through white skin.
Right.
And so we look at dark skin and we say we must be cursed. We don't get the opportunity to understand that the absolute antithesis is the truth. That we are not cursed, but we are blessed and highly favored. How do we know that? Because as we are born out of our mother's womb, we are automatically born on the right side of everything. Because they look at us and judge us by the color of our skin, not the content of our character.
There you go. You're absolutely correct. You know, when you in the book, you was talking about you were 16 years old. You were standing in the hallway and they said that they have a verdict. And you went back into the courtroom and it was announced guilty. And they sent you to Rikers. And why is Rikers such a horrible prison? Let me ask you that question first.
You know, Rikers there's so many facets, I think, that makes Rikers one of the most horrible places on earth. But I think part of it is because you have the proximity of people being able to go right to or talk right to or be connected right to the people who they once were. When we come home from prison, one of the most transformative things a person can do is to leave the communities that they came from. Right. And I'm not saying that because I want you to take away your value, right? If you know, like a lot of people in the entertainment industry, they happen to leave because they know that they have to insulate themselves, right? Why do they have to insulate themselves? Because America has created poverty and pushed it upon the people in the margins of life. And the people in the margins of life are now responding in a way where we call it the struggle or the survival mentality. What happens when you struggle? What happens when you have to survive? And that's the only thing that you can do. You do anything. And so in prison, a place like Rikers Island is a place where people sometimes have not yet been convicted of the crimes that they have so-called committed. And I say so-called because we find out that there's so many people, you look at the Khalif brothers of the world, who are not supposed to be there.
Right.
Right. And then you have other people who are actually criminals who have gotten caught, but they are still doing criminal things. They are running the jails. Everybody has this false narrative when they see people show photos of the prisons that they're in, and they look strong and buff and they pose and everything like that. And I'll never forget hearing a conversation that Ras Baraka had put on one of his albums. And he said, nobody talks about the grown men crying. Mm-hmm. I was in Clinton with Tupac. Mm-hmm. I was in Clinton, Dannemora with Tupac. And I remember hearing him say, on the gate. And that's something that people in the officers say to the inmates. He said, yo, on the gate. And everybody got on the gate. And he said, listen, man, I'm just trying to do my bid just like y'all. Everybody was sending him pieces of the magazines that they would rip out and send to him and say, hey, can you sign this? Sign this to my family, my daughter, my friends. I just want to let them know that I'm in here with you, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at prison has a way of turning people into criminals, even if you're not a criminal, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're not a, why do I say that? I say that because it is the absolute worst place that you can go. Once you've gone there, you've gone. You know that that's the worst that can happen outside of death. And so when you're in a struggle, right, you have to understand that in the struggle is not about a physicality. It's not about war in terms of fighting, in terms of beating someone. Right. War, its greatest tool is the mental to get you to accept defeat.
We know the thing about it is that I had a younger brother. He went to prison, and I went to visit him in prison. And you know, like you said, you know, I was in tears watching him, and he was saying, "I can't cry. I got to stay hard." And that false narrative. And then he said he had to connect with some certain people in the prison so he can stay safe. He had to get into a clique or a run so he can be able to have somebody have his back. And then you talk about, as you say, when your time becomes short, people can do things to make your time extend or attempt to kill you. So there's a mindset that operates in prison. I'm just taking knowledge from your book. Your book is amazing. And the book is called Better, Not Bitter, Living on the Purpose in the Pursuit of Racial Justice. And the story you take away, I'm looking at a humble man, looking at an educated man, and you're right. You don't fit the example of somebody who's been wronged, who's been in prison, and then actually taken away some really key developmental years. 15 to 18 is when you really start learning about responsibility, learning about being a man, learning about trying to go to college, learning about trying to, if I'm going to have a wife in my life. You was in jail during that period. And so what allowed you to be able to, I know your faith, I know the Muslim community was there for you, your parents were there, but you had to be there for yourself. How did you, as a mature young man, be there for yourself?
So I think a lot of that was when you asked me about the name, right? What do you respond to? Mm-hmm. I was told this, but I didn't yet really truly know this. And what I mean by it is that I was told that in the community where I came from, my parents had to observe me for 7 days.
Right.
They knew, just like African communities know, that the child that is born is actually a gift from the Creator. But in the Islamic community, what happens is that you have to observe the child to figure out who this is so that you can name it. You don't want to name it Hennessy. And I'm not saying anything bad about anyone who names their child Hennessy, but I want you to understand that when you give a person a name, that defines who they are. And so my parents named me Yusef. I never knew what Yusef meant. My middle name is Idris. My other middle name is Fa'adil, and my last name is Salaam. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people would say, "Hey, what's your name?" And I would say Yusef Salaam. Sometimes they would call me Joseph. And I got upset because Joseph don't sound nothing like Yusef, not to me. It wasn't until I got to prison that I found out in the Bible there was a young man named Yusef in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I found out in the Quran there's a young man named Joseph in the Quran. And I'm mixing it up, of course, because I found out the Arabic equivalent to the word Yusuf is Joseph in English. But the definition was never there. Reading books about baby names, I found out that Yusuf means God will increase, that Idris means the teacher, Fa'adil is with justice, and Salaam is peace. My parents named me 7 days after I was born. God will increase the teacher with justice and peace. Mm-hmm. When you are looking for purpose, quite oftentimes, it's not until later in our lives we say to ourselves, what am I supposed to be doing? What's my purpose in life? But imagine finding purpose in the valley of despair. Dr. King said, when you find your purpose in life, do it as if God himself called you to do it at this very moment.
Right.
And he gave us this beautiful example, not of the greatest purpose, but of what purpose still is. He said, if your purpose in life is to become a street sweeper, he said, sweep the streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep the streets like Beethoven composed music, like Leo Tom Price sang before the opera. Imagine that kind of individual turning up their light in dark spaces. Imagine that person raising their vibrations. And collectively, we can all raise our vibration. Collectively, we can all turn up our light. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when I looked at, being associated, right, in prison, it wasn't that I was just defining myself as Muslim, but I was born Muslim. But now I was studying. Anytime you have a people tell you what something is, oftentimes you say, I don't want to be that. You hear the word Muslim, and you say, those are terrorists. I remember telling my daughters once, I said, listen, if 2019 was very busy for me.
Right.
If I'm running towards a plane and I got to connect to other planes and all of this stuff, imagine this scenario. I'm running to a plane and I get to the plane. They're about to close the door and I get there just in the nick of the time.
Right.
And they say, wow, sir, we were just about to close the door. You made it. And I said, wow, God is the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
I get on the plane, I see somebody in first class, they had to open their water. I grab their water and say, is it okay? They say, yes. I say, thank you. I open their water, drink the water and say, wow, God is the greatest. Same scenario. Same scenario. Now, mind you, there are Christians in Arabia. Same scenario. They speak Arabic. They say Allah for God. Christians. Same scenario. I'm running to the plane. I get there. They say, wow, sir, you just made it. We were just about to close the door. And I say, Allahu Akbar. I just missed my plane.
Yeah. Yes.
But you know what happens, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm saying that the definitions,
Yes.
right? As soon as people understand, oh, they're just saying God.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What does Allahu Akbar mean? It means God is the greatest, or God is greater than anything. So when you hear the call to prayer, which says Allahu Akbar, say to yourself, I'm supposed to stop everything and turn to God and be thankful.
Wow. That's absolutely true.
But I have been given. And guess what? When you're thankful, God gives you more. It's a beautiful process.
We know the thing about it is that, because I want to wrap up, but I want to say a few things and I want you to respond to it. Is incarcerated. Then Donald Trump took out ads, $85,000 in ads, calling you guys everything, every bad name he could say that he could put in the newspaper. He then become our president. So we know the values he had for men of color. In 1997, you walked out of prison. Spent time in prison for a crime you didn't do. 2002, you was exonerated. Then you received a settlement. And then Ava DuVernay. I think what Ava DuVernay did with you guys was like from a visual and a global perspective really freed you guys. I said freed you guys in a media standpoint and in a standpoint. The court can say you're free, but what she did was set y'all free. And that's important to know. And now with that freedom that you now have, the intellect that you gained being educated in prison, being educated about life, being exonerated, getting some money for being in jail for a crime you didn't commit, which we know is never enough because those years were valued years. What is the purpose? What is your goal? Because you talked about purpose. As we close out this interview, what is your purpose, Master Yusef Salaam?
I think my greatest purpose is to call people to God. My greatest purpose is to utilize my story and tell people, like I've always said in more recent times, that the Central Park jogger case is not what you think it is. It's actually a love story between God and his people. Central Park jogger case, the case is a case where God has used it and placed the whole system on trial in order to produce a miracle in modern times. It's a story of how a people can be buried alive and forgotten. The system forgot we were seeds. And it's a story of a people who have been given a social death. And instead of being buried alive and forgotten, they emerged like the phoenix from the ashes. Because as they built the fire to consume us, they forgot that God is the owner of the heat. And so imagine if we believe again and we're thankful and we say to ourselves, help me, right? When you say to God, help me, guess what happens? God helps you.
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful. Like I said, it's one of those things that it's not until you are tested that you can really say, I got to testify. Because you can't testify unless you've been tested. I was listening to my inspiration, E.T., and he said something to the effect, he said, everybody wants to be a diamond, but nobody wants the pressure. Nobody wants the pressure, and then the more pressure, and then the more pressure that's added to create a diamond out of that piece of coal. And then after the pressure, nobody wants to be cut. Because cutting the coal into the shape of the diamond is what proves that it's a diamond. And it looks so beautiful. It's one of those things that you say to yourself, wow, this is one of the most rarest things on the planet. And I think that what we need to understand is that all of us are diamonds. We're just in the rough. But we're still diamonds.
Love it.
And when we see ourselves as that, we get the opportunity to give ourselves back permission to be great.
Well, you're great, my friend. Again, better, not bitter, living on purpose in the pursuit of racial justice. Master, it doesn't say master right there on the book, but it should say that. It should say humble. It should say a representation, a representative of blackness. It should say overcoming the odds. It should say so many blessings. A blessed man. It should say that too, because that's what you are. Thank you for coming on Money Making Conversations.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you want to see or hear any more of my Money Making Conversations interviews, please go to moneymakingconversation.com. I'm Rushion McDonald. I am your host.